Hi, I'm Jennet Conant, and I'm author of The Irregulars, Roald Dahl, and The British Spy Ring in Wartime Washington. The question that most readers ask me is, what's a nice girl like you doing writing all these books about World War II? I think that readers have come to expect authors of these kinds of books to be learned white-haired gentlemen. I come as a perennial surprise. Well, I'm a journalist by training, so I pretty much always follow the documents and where they lead me. In this case, I started looking for documents that would reveal something of Dahl's life as a spy. It's very tricky business because spies don't leave a trail behind them. But in poking around, I found a great cache of wartime correspondence between Roald Dahl and the Texas publishing tycoon Charles Marsh, who was one of the media figures that the British asked Dahl to spy on. And in that correspondence, I found all kinds of leads to other sorts of diaries and letters, including a very close relationship that Dahl formed with Vice President Henry Wallace. And that was fascinating because it really showed how Dahl, as a spy, befriended Wallace, became his confidant, his regular morning tennis partner, and eventually a source. They traded all kinds of information, not only about espionage, but about the election. Dahl was spying for the British, who wanted to know Roosevelt's chances of getting elected. Wallace was obsessed with Roosevelt's election results and his own chances of being appointed vice president again. You have to understand, Roosevelt was running for an unprecedented fourth term, and before that, an unprecedented third term. So all of this was new and a matter of great controversy. So it's fascinating to read the letters and the diaries and to follow along and see how Dahl made his way as a young amateur spy. The most shocking documents I found were that Dahl not only befriended Eleanor Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt and was a frequent guest at the White House, but he ended up charming Eleanor Roosevelt to such an extent that she invited him back for weekends to Hyde Park. And he filed very lengthy, detailed intelligence reports to the British on everything he heard and saw at Hyde Park. Everything from the president's health, which was a source of great concern because people knew he was ill, and there was a great question whether he'd be strong enough to run again. And the British were desperate to keep Roosevelt in office. He felt that he was their great American friend and supporter. To the state of the Roosevelt's marriage, Dahl speculates about whether Roosevelt might be having an affair. To real political concerns, his attitude towards Winston Churchill and the British and the progress of the war. So it's fascinating, and to read his intelligence reports was just amazing. My books always seem to start with a little phrase, a little snippet of description that I see somewhere that just catches my imagination, and then they rattle around in my brain, and I know it's a book. In this case, I was doing a lot of reading about the state of intelligence around the time of World War II. It was a mess, and I was toying with doing a book on that period. And I saw a small mention somewhere that said that among the many British operatives in wartime Washington was a young Roald Dahl, and that he was roommate with David Ogilvy, who went on to become the brilliant ad man that founded the agency Ogilvy and Mather. And it just really just caught my fancy, the idea of these two young characters on the make in wartime Washington. I just thought it was intriguing, and I just thought there has to be a book there. If there was one book that I would have to confess to rereading, let's see. It's a hard question for me because I'm a big rereader and I have a lot of favorites, books that I return to again and again. But I have to confess, perhaps a little guiltily, that my very favorite book is Brideshead Revisited. I've read it at least a dozen times. I have somehow managed to accumulate at least half a dozen copies. I must keep buying it in different editions, but I love it. I love the excess. I love the decay. I love the struggle between faith and despair, and the theme, the war as the ultimate end of innocence. I'm a sucker for that every time. There has been so much written about World War II, the greatest generation as a noble war, and all of that is true, but I think it's very important that people realize that wars are not pretty, and in the end, people will do anything to win, and that espionage has always been part of wars. and it operates at every level, and it corrupts at every level: government, journalism, and what we understand about the war, what we read about the war, the information we get about the war is shaped and fed to us in a million ways. So be very careful what you believe.